How's the royal family? I pray that everyone is doing well. Well, my royal family, I wanted to give at least a bit of time because I knew that some people would come forth and speak more about the sentencing of R. Kelly, and my strong interest was and continue to be the victims of R. Kelly. So I have some videos to play and also a audio to play the royal family. And before I get started, I was having a discussion with my youngest son yesterday about this. We were listening to Lisa Cabrera's commentary, and I was like, wow, I can remember being pregnant with you and this going on. And soon as I said that, I also said 25 years, and then I heard the word 25 years because my son is 25 years old. And what I don't like about all of this is the length of time it took. And then also there is a mixed bag of things that are going on. But I'm going to keep it really raw and really funky over here on the True Royal Family. And my backup channel is True Royal. So these are the things that we have to get into and speak truth. And what I want to caution folks is that there are females and males. We're not going to leave anyone out that have been sexually abused. I've had very close family members that have been sexually abused. The closest to me would be my own dear mother, bless her heart. Y'all know she has passed on. And as far as I know, my mother's sexual abuse started at the age of 9. You couldn't get a sweeter woman to have to be victimized like that. It's something that affects my being. So I just wanted to put that out. So I want folks, keep it core, say what you got to say. But in this particular situation, I don't want nobody in here re-victimizing, re-raping anyone because they have an opinion. Comments will be taken down, and anybody that got a wrench, you have full range during the premiere and after the premiere. I'm not playing with this, my royal family. I am being super, super sensitive. But the thing is, black women get left out on so much, and then we're over sexualized. Our royal bodies have been greatly abused by the enemy, and then it further extends also in our communities and everything. So there is a spotlight put on the victimization. Let's not lose sight of that. And I'm going to bring up the things that muddy it up too as well. I have to bring those things up. And was I there? Hell no, I wasn't there. But I live in California, northern, y'all know, and you hear things trickle down from southern, even though we know R. Kelly is not from Southern California, but he did spend a great deal of time there because of the nature of things. So I'm taking my time on this because this is sensitive. I'm giving folks time to just make whatever adjustments that they need to make, or if you can't handle something, just excuse yourself. You don't have to watch all these videos, my royal family. So let's get into this first video, and then, well, first what we're going to get into is the audio, and it's a little over 6 minutes.
R. Kelly sentenced to 30 years for sex trafficking and racketeering. Former R&B star faced up to life in prison after a Brooklyn jury found him guilty last year. News by Samantha Cherry, Travis Andrews, and Helena Andrews Dyer. Former R&B star R. Kelly was sentenced to 30 years in prison on Wednesday for racketeering and sex trafficking, charges stemming from nearly 30 years of allegations that he physically and sexually abused women and minors. It is a stunning fall for hitmaker Kelly, who won multiple Grammy Awards and released chart-topping music while dodging sexual misconduct allegations for decades. His is among the highest-profile cases to spring from the #MeToo movement, and the punishment handed down in a Brooklyn federal court is one of the harshest since the movement began. Film producer Harvey Weinstein was sentenced to 23 years for felony rape, and earlier this week, Ghislaine Maxwell received 20 years for aiding financier Jeffrey Epstein in the sex trafficking of young women and underage girls. During his 2021 trial, Kelly was depicted by former live-in girlfriends and employees as a star who used his fame, wealth, and power to control and sexually abuse women. The mounting allegations against the singer tested the loyalty of ardent fans that had dubbed Kelly the king of R&B and kept his music at the top of the charts. The Brooklyn federal jury found Kelly, 55, guilty of 1 count of racketeering and 8 violations of the Mann Act, a law created to curb sex trafficking across state lines. The public has to be protected from behaviors like this, Judge M. Donnelly said as she delivered Kelly's sentence, according to media reports. These crimes were calculated and carefully planned and regularly executed for almost 25 years. For decades, whispers of Kelly's behavior were deafening. And yet the R&B singer continued to sell out major arenas and bask in the support of his fans in the music industry until the #MeToo movement founded by Tarana Burke and a Lifetime documentary forced a public and legal reckoning. People will say, well, why didn't anyone notice? Asked Mickey Kendall, an author who appeared in Surviving R. Kelly, the docuseries about the singer's abuse. The answer is that we all noticed. No one cared because we were black girls. Lizette Martinez, who has said she was abused by Kelly when she was a minor, said his 30-year sentence wasn't enough, but I'm pleased with it. It's fine. Kelly's racketeering conviction included 14 underlying acts. Witnesses testified that the 90s hitmaker fraudulently married R&B singer Aaliyah, who was 15 and thought to be pregnant at the time, by bribing a government official to give her a fake ID that indicated she was an adult. Kelly did this to protect himself legally while he sexually abused Aaliyah, starting when she was about 13, according to prosecutors. She died in a plane crash when she was 22. During the trial, one accuser identified as Jane testified that she was forced into sexual encounters with other women and was unable to leave rooms without Kelly's permission. Others testified that Kelly and his team would use a celebrity to lure his victims, many of them minors hoping for big breaks in the music business, only to be sexually abused by Kelly. He was also convicted of crossing state lines for illegal sexual activity, coercion and enticement, and transportation of a minor. I hope this sentencing serves as its own testimony that it doesn't matter how powerful, rich, or famous your abuser may be, or how small they may make you feel. Justice only hears the truth, said Breon Peace, the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of New York. At Wednesday's sentencing hearing, one of Kelly's victims, Angela, turned to him as she spoke, according to media reports. With every addition of a new victim, you grew in wickedness, she said. You used your fame and power to groom and coach underage boys and girls for your own sexual gratification. The sentence didn't come as a great big surprise, said Kelly lawyer Jennifer Bonjean, adding that he will appeal the conviction. It's just the beginning of the fight. During the trial, Kelly's lawyers argued that his accusers were groupies seeking a lavish lifestyle. They later said he deserved a reduced sentence because he was allegedly sexually abused as a child. He's not a predator, Bonjean said. He has regrets, and he is sad. Kelly's case is one of the few in which the victims were mostly black women, which activists use to draw attention to how sexual violence disproportionately affects women of color. We are glad to see a sentence of 30 years, given the gravity of the abuse Kelly perpetrated. The sentencing in this case, where many of the survivors are women of color who fought tirelessly for Kelly to be brought to justice, sends an important message, Aaron Robinson, Director of Media Relations for RNN, a nonprofit anti-sexual assault organization, said in a statement. Every survivor is deserving of empathy and justice, and we must create space for survivors from marginalized communities to be heard and believed. We hope this case encourages survivors from these communities to share their stories. You are not alone. Kelly was one of the most popular R&B singer-songwriters of the 90s. For years, the recording industry ignored allegations against him, and Kelly seemed untouchable. In 2008, he was acquitted in a child pornography case in which he was accused of making a sex tape with a minor. The jury did not convict Kelly. His defense team argued that the identity of the girl in the video could not be confirmed. The multi-platinum selling star continued to churn out hits for years, from I Believe I Can Fly to Step in the Name of Love, before a social media campaign, #NeedRKelly, began calling for the public to stop supporting him. In 2019, the 6-part Lifetime documentary Surviving R. Kelly, executive produced by Dream Hampton, Tamara Simmons, and Brie Miranda Bryant, put him under more scrutiny. As the decades of accusations and allegations made against the star were publicly re-examined, Kelly's legal problems grew, and many fans began to reassess their loyalty to the singer. Kelly still faces various criminal charges in Chicago and Minnesota. In August, he will be tried in Illinois on federal charges of child pornography and obstruction of justice. In that case, Kelly switched defense attorneys, hiring Bongine, who helped free Bill Cosby last year after he served nearly 3 years of a prison sentence for sexual assault. He pleaded not guilty to the charges in 2020.
All right, my royal family. Let me get back over here. This is not easy. This is not easy whatsoever. I can't fully imagine the tyranny that these women continue to go through. It's a continuous thing when a person is victimized on whatever level. I did attempt a while back ago to watch that documentary, and I couldn't get through it. It was just too taxing on my psyche. I have a tendency, because I feel so deeply about many things, to take this stuff with me. And I had to learn my limitations on what type of videos I can present the royal family. But we're going to continue to focus on the victims.
Kelly is a predator.
R&B singer R. Kelly was sentenced to 30 years in prison for sexual abuse, marking the end of a sordid, stunning fall for the multi-platinum artist, who at 55 could spend the rest of his life behind bars. The sentence was imposed 9 months after Kelly was convicted of racketeering and sex crimes, which included luring women and underage girls into his orbit for sex. Federal prosecutor Breon Peace.
With the aid of his fame, his money, and most importantly, his inner circle, R. Kelly preyed upon children and young women for his own sexual gratification for decades. He continued committing his crimes for almost 30 years and avoided punishment until today.
The sentencing came after several accusers, some of them tearful, told the judge about how Kelly promised to mentor them and help them attain stardom, only to subject them to degrading sexual treatment and physical harm. Lizette Martinez was among them.
Today was a very special but hard day for us. I personally, this happened to me a long time ago. I was 17, I'm 45 today. I never thought that I would be here to see him be held accountable for the atrocious things that he did to children.
Prosecutors had asked for more than 25 years, arguing he showed a callous disregard for his victims and showed no remorse. Kelly's lawyer, Jennifer Bongine, said the singer would appeal.
For us, it's just the beginning of the fight, frankly.
Kelly did not speak during Wednesday's hearing, but has repeatedly denied sexual abuse accusations. He will likely be transported soon to a jail in Chicago, where he faces an August trial in federal court on child pornography and obstruction charges. He also faces various state charges in Illinois and Minnesota.
All right, my royal family. what I want to say is that what gets me about all of this is that how long it was allowed to continue, because in America, or let's just say in the world general, they don't give a damn about black women being sexually abused. And I want y'all to remember this. I am not a supporter of this opportunist whatsoever. So I don't want y'all to get anything misconstrued about True Royal. I don't even want to mention her name. She likes to be a predator too as well. And I am not a supporter of these women's groups. I'm not a supporter of them whatsoever. Because when I had a few years ago reported when those black women were sexually violated violently by that pig, did any of those women's groups, white women's groups, come and stand up for them? And then when they were called on the carpet about that particular situation, they were saying, well, we didn't say anything because we didn't want to mess up the case. Just whatever. Y'all don't give a damn about black women. So it is our duty and responsibility, my royal family. I am taking as much time that I choose to deliberately to put a spotlight on black women and black men and black children, our royals, being sexually violated. So let me take something down here real quick and let's get into this next video.
You know, if this was normal, I didn't know if this is how adults acted. Like I just didn't know.
He has this type of like intimidation right off the bat. I was just waiting for it to be over.
I think he gets some sort of satisfaction within himself knowing that he's taking control over other people. Maybe I would go without eating for a couple days as punishment. Also being slapped and beaten, kicked. I was introduced to one of the girls that he told me he trained, and since she was 14, those were his words.
Taking advantage of minors will not be tolerated.
I was a little girl in like a bad man's world. I never really recovered from it.
The 6-part series interviewed 50 people, family members, your former tour manager, numerous women who all claim that you abused them. Are you saying everybody in that documentary was not telling the truth about you? Everybody?
If you really look at that documentary, which I'm sure you have,
I have.
Everybody said something bad about me. Nobody said nothing good. They was describing Lucifer. I'm not Lucifer.
All right, my royal family, let me quickly put a stop to this. And I want to say something about this as I
July 4th.
Let me take this down all the way. I want to say something about this. Where is it at? So, R. Kelly said that everybody said something bad about him. So it was known about R. Kelly's reputation way before I think we even knew R. Kelly. He was known for being a predator and hanging out around the various high schools. And, knowing what you know, I do believe that there were a sector of parents that did pretty much sell their children out, pretty much, just handed their child over for fame and fortune. That is a very strong lure, wanting to get in Holly hell, and everything. So yeah, I do believe that there was a sector of that. But the thing that bothers me about it was parents knew about R. Kelly's reputation. See, that's where where things get muddied up. So there's like a mixed bag of certain things, but trust and believe, there is no doubt in my heart that these women were violated. So these are the things that I hate to bring up, but got to keep it core, true and raw. That there, in that arena, there is going to be women and men approach people because of the allure of, and what we are hearing is, like I often said, there's a world behind YouTube. Well, there's a world behind Holly Hale. There's a world behind the music industry, and how, you've heard of the casting couch, and that came from the enemy, how they do their own women. Okay, so let's not lose sight here. I'm trying to make sure I cover all bases, because somebody gonna be real quick to say, well, you didn't say this and you didn't say that. I can't remember every damn thing. I'm doing the best I can with what I can deliver to the royal family, and being very selective what comes out of my mouth with this, because I don't want to victimize anyone, but I feel like I have a duty and responsibility, my royal family, as much as I want to take as much time as possible to love up on victims, faceless victims, voiceless victims that will never ever be heard from whatsoever and have to suffer in silence. So let's hear some legality. You're not going to hear this whole video, but I know where to stop at.
We have breaking news right now. A judge has sentenced singer R. Kelly to 30 years in prison. He was convicted in September of racketeering and 8 counts of sex trafficking.
During the trial, multiple witnesses spoke about how they were sexually and physically abused by Kelly. Prosecution argued he used his celebrity status to create a, quote, network of people at his disposal to target girls, boys, and young women for his own sexual gratification. Let's bring in Paul Batista. He is a criminal defense lawyer as well as the author of the book Civil RICO. Paul, thanks very much for being with us. I want to get your reaction to this. Are you surprised?
I'm not at all surprised. These were very heavy sentences, but this has been a bad 2 days for the rich and famous. Miss Maxwell yesterday and R. Kelly today are both in effect sentenced to life in prison. And the size of R. Kelly's sentence, which exceeded the amount that the government was demanding, didn't really come as a surprise to me, given the fact that he, unusually enough, he was convicted of violations of the racketeering statute, what we commonly call the RICO statute, which carries enormous penalties. So it was no surprise to me.
So, Paul, as you pointed out, prosecutors were asking for 25 years. The judge issued a higher sentence than that. Why do you think that the prosecution didn't ask for a higher sentence, considering what you said? And how often does that happen, that the judge exceeds the prosecution's recommendations?
It does happen fairly frequently. You have to remember that judges sit there through the entire trial. They are, except for ruling on objections to evidence, they form their own impressions of the evidence, of the witnesses. They're staring at the defendants. And judges do have, even in the federal courts, much more so in the state courts, judges do have discretion to exceed what we call the sentencing guidelines. And this particular judge is not known as a harsh sentencer, but she's a very attentive judge. And she must have formed some very distinct reactions to Mr. Kelly's demeanor, his constant substitution of lawyers. I think that tended to cut against him. But again, the basic principle would be that she, the judge in the Kelly case, was applying that driving force of the racketeering statute, which was not an element in Ms. Maxwell's sentencing yesterday.
Well, Kelly has replaced his legal team since he was convicted. He is now represented by the same attorney who helped get Bill Cosby's conviction overturned. What does that suggest, Paul, about his strategy?
Well, his strategy seems to be all over the place. If you look at the docket sheet, which is publicly available, Kelly has substituted attorneys with great frequency. He has a right to do that. He did it. Certainly, if he believes that by bringing in new lawyers at this late date, just before the sentencing, he's throwing a Hail Mary pass, because the record is already set. The sentencing memoranda of both sides were already submitted, and the judge had probably already made her decision. Certainly, Kelly is going to appeal. Certainly, Ms. Maxwell will appeal. But the unfortunate part for both of them is that convictions in federal court are very infrequently reversed.
And speaking of federal court, Paul, Kelly is facing a separate federal trial in Chicago for child pornography and obstruction charges there. Now, that is expected to start in August. Is today's sentencing going to impact that trial at all?
It's an open question to me, quite frankly, Tanya, and I don't want to get overly technical. Kelly was acquitted by a state court on the charges for which he is now going to be tried in the federal court in Illinois. So, number one, I would have the issue as his lawyer of whether or not he was facing double jeopardy, in effect being tried twice for the same offense. And it may well be that given the sentence here in New York against Kelly, the proceeding in federal court in Illinois, in Chicago, may well disappear. I'm not making that prediction, but that does often happen.
Back on the situation here in New York, does R. Kelly have a route for an appeal? Do you see a basis for that, given the facts of the case?
Well, he actually has. I'll put aside the pornographic element of all of this, which is horrendous. But as a technical matter, and I don't want to, hack in the weeds, I think he may have a stronger basis for an appeal of the racketeering conviction, because essential to establishing a racketeering conviction are a few elements. But in order to do that, you as the government have to show that the victim was damaged in his or her business or property. And it seems to me from the start, a glaring omission here has been the lack of an impact. Well, I don't doubt the suffering of these young women and now grown women, but significantly omitted from the proof was what were the money damages sustained by the victims. And Kelly may have a fairly strong argument along those lines, in which case the substance wouldn't be reversed, but the case might well be sent back for the government to have another try at establishing that critical element of loss of monetary or financial loss.
All right, Paul Batista, if you could stand by for one moment. We also want to bring in CBS News national correspondent Jericka Duncan, who is outside the courthouse with more on this. Hi, Jericka. Can you give us some color on what happened today inside the courthouse when the sentencing was read?
Well, we were possibly expecting to hear from R. Kelly, but in the end, his attorney said that her client would not be giving any statements, as you guys had just mentioned, those pending cases. But the judge started off by simply saying that the sentencing of another human being was probably the hardest thing that a judge has to do, but laid out what this sentencing was supposed to reflect. The sentence, she said, must reflect the seriousness of the crime, the act as a deterrent, and protect the public from future crimes. She mentioned a number of other things, but at the end, as you just mentioned, of course, if you're just joining us, R. Kelly sentenced to 30 years in prison. The federal prosecutors were asking for an excess of 25 years, so they got what they were looking for. Meanwhile, his defense team was hoping somewhere in the range of 10 years because they felt as though the punishment did not fit the crimes that he was convicted of. Again, we're hoping to hear from some of the victims who were inside today. We know that federal prosecutors are expected to come out and address the media. Something that I thought was very interesting, because we have heard from some of these victims before during the actual testimony. 45 witnesses were called at that time back in September during that 6-week trial. But what I thought was interesting was Faith Rogers, who we first actually interviewed a couple of years ago, and said that she got an STD and unknowingly from R. Kelly when she was 19 years old, went up before the court and talked directly to R. Kelly, talked about what he did to her. But then her father wanted to address him and said, literally, I want you to look at me man to man, father to father. And he talked about his own experience as a father being abused as a young child, and empathized with R. Kelly, and basically said, you know, we could come here today and be angry and upset, but we forgive you. We have compassion for you, and we believe that there is forgiveness in all of this if you admit to what you did. But as you heard earlier, as I was listening to you all speaking to the attorney, R. Kelly did not admit any wrongdoing. He had nothing to say to the numerous victims today who gave victim impact statements. But again, the judge saying that this was not a case about sex, but that it was about violence, cruelty, and control.
Jericka, I'm wondering, and you touched on it there just a moment ago, but what was it like inside that courtroom as that sentence was read? It's such an emotional time for these survivors. There has been so much emotion leading up to this moment. What is it that the reaction was throughout that courtroom as that sentence was read?
You know, I didn't hear any of the people who testified before, and honestly, I was in the overflow room, so I couldn't get a good look at what, if any, there was an emotional reaction or anything. I didn't hear any sighs of relief or anyone say anything. But I think, without a doubt, having spoken to many of these women before, there is a sense of relief and finality at these sentencings. Obviously, it first happens when the person accused of these crimes is actually convicted, and that happened last year. But now here we are facing the day of sentencing, where these victims or survivors, if you will, get a chance to directly address the person that they say destroyed their lives and change the outcome of what they could have been, what they wanted to be, because of this man that they believe took advantage of them. So just to hear the emotion from them, it was intense. And again, I don't think any of us were expecting to hear from the father of somebody who was abused by R. Kelly.
Sure. Paul, if you're still there, I'm wondering if you could comment on what we just heard from Jericka, that, you know, R. Kelly showed no remorse. He had nothing to say to the victims or the family of the victims. I mean, how can that factor into, number one, the chance of an appeal, as we were discussing earlier, and number two, you know, any sort of early, obviously he has a long prison, term ahead of him, and he's sort of early released from prison.
This is a fascinating case study. I think that
I'm going to leave it there, my royal family, because I have listened to that part, and I just wanted to continue to focus just on the victims. And what I want to say in closing, my royal family, is that there was also supporters. In order for R. Kelly to continue to get away what he got away with, there were people that were direct supporters, that his handlers. They knew that there was something going on. They could have even, some of them could have even possibly participated. I have heard statements and interviews from his brother too as well, where he gives the family dynamics that they were also victims of sexual abuse. But there's a lot of people that are victims of sexual abuse that don't do these horrendous things. But then, like I said, when you combine fame and fortune and all those things, it makes an environment where you, whatever your isms may be, that you can partake into these type of negative behaviors. So I'm going to leave it there, my royal family. And again, in closing, I'm asking respectfully for folks to be super sensitive, because as I speak, there are victims watching this, and I pray that I projected enough to show my compassion and sensitivity. So do what you do best, my royal family. Wow, it's so sensitive. Wow. That's how I'm affected by this. Sometimes I get affected. So, just, give your opinion. Ashe to the royal family. I know you're not used to me closing like this, but I just can't even get the words out today. Ashe, my royal family. Wow.